Passport? Check. Travel itinerary? Check. Smooth geopolitical relations? Not check. An American passport is one of the strongest tools you can have in your travel bag if you're planning your next vacation. Even with that added advantage, freedom and ease of travel aren't exactly accessible. And we have strained geopolitical conditions to blame for that. The American government doesn't have the best rep in several countries of the world. Those issues either go back in time or are just very political in nature. So, before you heavily plan your next holiday, watch this video to learn about 10 countries where American passports don't work like a charm. And oh, watch out for the travel advisory that asks you to leave a DNA sample and your will before going to this one country. Let's get started. Number 10. North Korea. Alright, this shouldn't surprise you. North Korea and the US haven't seen eye to eye since the Korean War in the early 1950s. So today, decades later, US citizens are unauthorized to enter into North Korean territory unless they have a special passport from the State Department. And of course, the state isn't issuing you a passport just so you can enjoy the scenic views of the Baekdu Mountains. Honestly, the tense relationship between the two countries is a massive missed opportunity because North Korea is a cultural heritage site. Yet we have to talk about how hostile local laws are against Americans. You see, you can't even strike up a conversation with a local without the government's authority letter. Taking pictures is frowned upon as well. In fact, the North Korean authorities are likely to confiscate most of your electronics at the airport because they fear that you might be spying for the US government. Yup, things are that bad. So yeah, if you want to embark on a journey to explore Korean culture, South Korea is your only shout. Number 9. Saudi Arabia. It might be an unpopular decision to include Saudi Arabia on this list, but hear me out. It's true that many Saudis are extremely welcoming towards American tourists and workers. In fact, the country is known for its hospitality. If you get a chance to befriend one of the locals, it's possible that you're not footing any bill whatsoever. But we can't exactly generalize the sentiment because certain parts of the country are highly anti-West. Cities like Riyadh, Qasim, and Ha'il tend to follow their Islamic culture conservatively, so they're prone to hostility towards American values such as freedom of expression for women. Generally, the US and Saudis have very diplomatic and friendly ties, but in these conservative hubs, you can't exactly go and get yourself a tour guide. Locals are more likely to frown upon your dressing as well as the way you talk. And if you're an unmarried couple traveling together, it's definitely not going to be a vibe. Not to mention, these parts of the country are not used to receiving tourists, so they often lack infrastructure like friendly hotels or resorts. Prior to 2019, Saudi Arabia mostly issued visas to religious pilgrims, so if you're expecting to get an alcohol use permit at your hotel, you might want to reconsider your options. Number 8. Iran. You'll be shocked to know that many Americans travel to Iran and they enjoy the carpet shops in Isfahan, the ruins of Persepolis, and even the local underground shops in Tehran. No, that's not a part of a desperate fantasy that I have. It's actually legal to travel to Iran on an American passport, even though the State Department's official line is, do not travel to Iran due to kidnapping and arbitrary arrest and detention of US citizens. Well, the travel advisory is quite legit because diplomatic ties between the two countries have been hostile since the Iranian Revolution in 1979. Since then, an extremely authoritative government has ruled over the citizens, depriving them of basic liberties like freedom of expression. Such intolerance has trickled down to the locals as well, who don't welcome Americans into their shops or hotels. But there's an antidote to that. Recently, many Americans have visited Iran through a legal and safe means of group travel that is permitted by both governments. You can't go backpacking in Iran. You'd need a government-approved travel agency like Epic Backpacker Tours to facilitate your touristy visit. Even then, the visa process is tiring, and you can't be spontaneous in Iran. Plus, not sticking with your tour guide might end up being a dangerous situation. Number 7. Bhutan. Planning on visiting the Himalayan country to hike up the mighty mountains? Think again. Bhutan doesn't have any embassy with the US because, well, the country isn't exactly looking forward to seeing Americans wandering about in their fragile ecosystem. The country doesn't trust Western tourists to understand the sanctity of their environment, so they only issue a limited number of visas. You can apply for it, but you'd be stuck with a tourist guide. And on top of that, you'll have to pay at least $200 in tourist fees for every single day you spend in Bhutan. Doesn't seem cost-effective at all. Number 6. Somalia. So, your bags are packed and you're about to hop on a plane to enjoy one of the most breathtaking coastlines in the world. But wait, the US State Department wants you to first write your will and leave behind multiple DNA samples. You're surely gonna come back to the US, so why take these bleak measures? If you're traveling to Somalia, the government fears that the criminal groups prevalent in the country might kidnap you for ransom, or you'll be stuck in some arbitrary detention with no way out. Since 2007, the US has targeted terrorist militant groups in the country via airstrikes, so it's just not safe for anyone to travel to Somalia in the middle of a civil war. Number 5. Iraq. There's no denying that Iraq offers an exclusive peek into one of the world's oldest and living civilizations, but to enjoy that cultural experience, you'll have to trade off some very important aspects of traveling, like security and freedom to move. The US has advised its citizens to not travel to Iraq. The underlying reason behind this travel advisory is obviously the 2003 invasion of Iraq, which was initiated by the US. Such geopolitical rifts have left the people of Iraq extremely hostile towards Americans. Particularly, the law enforcement agencies inside and outside the airports are unfriendly towards US passport holders. You might be subjected to unwarranted checks and safety measures. Number 4. Venezuela. Even the locals don't recommend traveling to their homeland. Yup, the situation is that bad in Venezuela. The US has its own travel advisory for South American countries due to the tense relationships between the nations. However, the story goes further than that. In most parts of Venezuela, especially towards the Colombian border, people are actively anti-US. Your average American look with shorts, a crossbody bag, and a flashy iPhone to photograph everything won't work in the country. In fact, you'd have to blend in with the locals, possibly speak Spanish to communicate, and you'd have to stick to a top-rated tour guide for your ease and safety. Many tourists have complained about getting robbed or carjacked in the country, and trust me when I say, going to the local police station won't help your cause. Not to mention, the capital city, Caracas, isn't considered to be a safe haven at all for the locals as well. No wonder Venezuelans on the internet won't recommend their country for your next holiday. Number 3. Russia. Do not be a helpful American and try to return someone's dropped wallet in Russia. Hear me out for a second. Of course, you can't exactly make plans to roam in St. Petersburg as Russia is busy fighting a war in Ukraine. The conditions in the country are highly volatile, and the State Department can't offer you quick services if you get stuck in the country. But for some whack reason, if you still want to visit the country, you'd feel the anti-American sentiment everywhere. Once the locals identify your American accent, you'll be stuck with stares and active hostility. Plus, certain locals also have a knack for robbing off your crisp dollars. The popular gimmick is that someone will drop their wallet right in front of you, and you, being a nice person, would run after them to return their possession. Simple enough, right? Wrong. The owner will say something like, "Oh, why are $200 missing from my wallet?" And bam, you'd be stuck footing the bill, or the locals will take you to the police in a lawless land. Take your pick. Number 2. Myanmar. From the snow-capped Himalayas in the north to the pristine aqua-blue water in the south, Myanmar is a sight to behold. But not when the country is torn between a civil war. The official US policy is that you shouldn't travel to the country that's under a brutal military regime that persecutes democratic forces. It's not surprising that the US has spoken against the military officials in the country, and that has turned pro-military sympathizers extremely anti-American. Yup, it's simply better to stick to some virtual guides of the country because traveling to Myanmar is one of those write your will before hopping onto the plane situation. The political turmoil is uncertain. One minute you'd be enjoying the Burmese curry in a nice local shop, and the next minute the military would be storming the town. Number 1. Cuba. I solemnly swear I am not traveling to Cuba for tourist activities. I wish I was messing with you. But even under the Biden administration, traveling to Cuba purely for leisure is not allowed. Since 2022, it has been legal to visit the country. But in order for you to smoke those authentic cigars, you'd need to sign an affidavit to state the purpose of your visit to the Cuban land. The most ironic bit is that tourism isn't listed on the affidavit at all. Your safest bet is to tick the box that says support for the Cuban people, because that entails supporting locals through economic means. You'd have to give the visa officers an itinerary and basically include how you're going to spend your dollars. You'd have to give the visa officers an itinerary that basically includes how you're going to spend your dollars on local businesses like booking hotels, eating at local restaurants, or buying something from the markets. So yeah, you're doing touristy stuff by legally signing a document that says that you're not a tourist or just an ardent supporter of the Cuban economy. Yup, it's confusing, but hey, if you're willing to go through that complex legal process, you'll be rewarded with authentic Cuban cigars and the beautiful old Havana. Travel with caution though. Cubans aren't forgiving towards the sanctions that have plagued their economy for years. So, did I derail some of your vacation plans? It's probably for the best. See you in the next informative vid.